If you've ever looked at yourself in the mirror and thought you've trained really hard, consistently for a while, but you still don't look wide, you still don't look muscular, you still don't look big, chances are it's because you're not training your shoulders properly. Although shoulders don't take up a significant amount of your muscle mass for your whole body, they do take up a significant amount of the shape that your body has when you are fully developed. You can see this example in many professional bodybuilders, if not all professional bodybuilders, that they have super capped delts. They literally look like they've stuck a bowling ball on their shoulders. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that. What's up, I'm Lockie, a final year sport and exercise science student at Oxford Brookes University. With over 3 years of strength and hypertrophy training experience, I've helped countless amounts of people get insane shoulders. In this video, I'm going to cover the best exercises for your delts, the reasons behind their effectiveness, and how to perform them correctly for maximal muscle engagement. The first thing that we need to understand is that your shoulders are made up of 3 different parts called heads. You have the posterior delt, the medial delt, and the anterior delt. Or in other words, your rear, side and front delt muscle. They are what make up the whole shoulder muscle. So in order to get that proper 3D supersized shape of your shoulders, you need to make sure you actually target each of these heads of your shoulder effectively and consistently. But obviously each head requires a slightly different strategy, so I'm going to break these all down for you and how you can actually get a proper 3D look. Because most people just think that the side delts are the most important thing, because obviously if you stand straight on and you look at someone, it's the side delts that pop out to the side, obviously, and that's what gives you that really wide look. But if you want to look big from all angles and have that proper wide frame, you need to also be targeting your front and rear delts, because that's when you start to look big from the side as well. So starting from the back first, we're going to start with rear delts, and my number 1 exercise for rear delts is a rear delt fly or a reverse fly. Rear delt flies are a must-have isolation exercise for targeting the rear delts, which are often an overlooked muscle in shoulder training. Research done by Gentil and colleagues in 2016 confirms that rear delt flies are highly effective for hypertrophy when done with proper form. So the way I would set it up is get a bench in front of the cable stack like you're about to do a cable press, but instead you want your chest to be on the back part of the bench, and then grab one side of the cable and then the other side of the cable, ensuring your shoulders are rounded over to ensure there's no activation of any other muscle groups, and then fly backwards, but only to a point where your arms are parallel with the midline of your body. If you go back any further, you may struggle to feel that muscle because other muscles are wanting to take over during that movement. And on to number 2, possibly my favorite exercise on the list, is the incline dumbbell row. Now, incline dumbbell rows are often overlooked but are great for hitting the rear delts if you've performed them properly. Very similar to the last exercise, if you don't perform these properly, because the rear delts are such a small muscle in comparison to the rest of your back musculature, the other muscles are going to want to take over. This exercise is super beneficial, especially for people with shoulder injuries, because it helps to maintain a balance and stability from the front and rear delt. So for this exercise, you want to proper bench up at around 30 to 40 degrees of incline and lie with your chest on the bench. You then put the dumbbells on the floor in front of you, reach over whilst hanging your shoulders over the front of the bench and row backwards like you would normally. However, a key point in this exercise is, again, don't row too far back where you can feel your mid and upper back contracting, and you want to make sure you have a 45-degree angle of shoulder adduction, which means you don't want a right angle between your elbow and your hip, but you also don't want to be tucking your elbows completely in. You want exactly halfway, as this aligns the movement properly in the same direction in which the muscle fibers align in the rear delt muscle. Now, moving on to the medial delts, we're going to kick this off with a cable lateral raise. Now, this is a very important one because there's lots of specifics behind it. So because your mid delt is weakest at 90 degrees of shoulder adduction, you want to manipulate the exercise so the weight is harder at the bottom and easier at the top, so it makes the resistance curve constant. Or in other words, the resistance doesn't drop off depending on where you are in the movement. The resistance stays constant throughout the whole range of motion. You might be sat there thinking, okay, it's easy to say that, but how do I actually do it? So let me explain. So when you're using a cable stack and you're doing a lateral raise, the hardest point in that movement will be when there is a 90-degree angle between the cable and the forearm. So bearing that in mind, you want to set the cable stack up so it begins at hand height. And then you can grab the cable either with a D handle or just holding the cable itself and do a lateral raise like normal. Now this movement might feel weird because if you're used to doing dumbbell lateral raises, obviously the resistance gets harder the further up in the range of motion you get. But with this movement, because it's on a cable and we're starting it at the hardest point, which is usually where you're the strongest, you'll feel the resistance is constant. And then once your arm gets to 90 degrees, bring it back down slowly, but allow a stretch across your body. And now the next mid-delt exercise is a dumbbell lateral raise. Now this is a difficult one because obviously there's only so many variations of a lateral raise you can actually do, meaning the ways to target your mid-delt are limited. So obviously there are many variations to using a dumbbell lateral raise movement, but here is my favorite one. It's basically where you lean against a wall or you lie against a bench, whatever you prefer, and the starting position should be so your arm is across your hip. And obviously you can only use this with one dumbbell at a time, so you'll have to do the left arm, right arm and rest, then left arm, right arm and rest, and so on. And then you just carry on the lateral raise movement like you would normally. You use this position because, like I said before, it makes the starting position, or at least tries to, be equally as hard as the finishing position, which is what we want at the end of the day. Because generally speaking, doing a standard dumbbell lateral raise, you're going to find it very easy at the bottom portion of the movement. But if you're leaning into the wall and having the dumbbell come across your hip, you're making that beginning portion that little bit more difficult. And now finally, it's the front delt. And for this one, I'm only using one exercise because your front delts are often overactivated during any pressing movement and other movements too. So it's generally the head of the shoulder that is the most overdeveloped. So because it is getting tension throughout the week without direct stimulus, you don't really need to do more than one set per session, in my opinion. And some people would even say targeting it at all is a waste of time. I used to personally think this, but I don't anymore. So for the front delts, my favorite exercise is an overhead press, but in the variation where you use a barbell attachment for the two cables and do essentially a cable overhead press. So you set up a bench between the two cable stacks, attach the barbell attachment to either end and press like you would normally. I like the constant tension, the stretch you can get at the bottom of the movement, and generally just the stability and the safety of being able to bail a lot easier than a dumbbell or a standard barbell overhead press. Just make sure you keep your core tight and control the eccentric movement to get the most benefit from this exercise. So focusing on these key exercises will help you build that super wide X frame everyone is looking for in their physique. So whether you're looking for strength or aesthetics, consistency within these moves is crucial. So using all of these exercises in conjunction with each other will help you build that super wide frame you're after. Just make sure you follow the key principles for exercises like you would normally and apply them to these exercises too. Because adding these into your routine will help you build that well-rounded, balanced look of your shoulder. So now you know the best ways to build your shoulders in 2024, take a look at my video on how to build your biceps in 2024, explaining all the science involved behind it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new, smash the thumbs up and turn on the bell icon if you want to get notified every time I post. That's all from me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.